What's that? More towards us. Yeah. My name is Larry Goldberg. I'm with the American Society of Civil Engineers. I know you called Gareth Young.
Are you signed up?
Yes, we are signed up.
Okay.
If y'all didn't mind, since you
Okay.
called Gareth, if we could just split it up, we'll make it short here.
Okay, that's good.
So again, this is Gareth Young and Griselda Gonzalez to my right here. Again, we're the American Society of Civil Engineers, ASCE. I am currently the president of the Texas section, and we just want to reach out and say thank you to the committee and the commission and all of what y'all are doing and helping out here in the whole region. We'd like to be able to offer ASCE as a go-to agency and resource for the committee to help resolve the problems. Our global section up in New York and Washington, and then our Texas section, our branches have made donations and been very supportive of all the rebuilding and efforts. We want to be able to offer our technical expertise in helping come up with solutions and finding ways to solve these future problems. We currently have released our 2017 ASCE report card, which I think y'all stated in some of y'all's documents, that rated drainage as a D across the state of Texas. So we want to be part of the solution. We want to be part of the go-to agency and to help resolve the issue. So as that, just wanted to offer ASCE and get y'all on radar and connect with you guys and offer us as a way to be part of the solution in future rebuilding.
Well, I imagine you will be. And could you give me comments? You heard the previous gentleman talk about sedimentation and your experience of going in, or at least some of your members of going in, and you see it all over the coast where you've got areas that have silted in and they got continuing dredging operations to clean it out because it's perpetual. It just keeps flowing in. So can you talk a little bit about that, and if you have any experience with Lake Houston, the sedimentation issue there?
I really don't have any experience with that. I mean, I am familiar. I mean, that's why, stormwater pollution prevention with a lot of construction, there was a lot of sediment that was being dumped in our lakes and waterways for the construction activities. I mean, some of that's just natural. I'm not familiar. I know the sand mines are over there in the Kingwood area, and I've heard different stories, so I don't want to comment or anything on that, but it would be something that ASCE, we do have certain committees and institutes that would be reach out and be part of the solution and help provide some guidelines for that.
That'd be good.
So our Coast to Waterways institutes, we can connect afterwards, so please feel free to contact me and we'll connect up with the right experts. So
that'd be great. Thank you, Larry.
I'm going to turn it over to Gareth, who's our Houston branch president, to say a couple of comments, and then Griselda will also.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I want to thank you all for coming down to Houston, getting to hear
Just
from
state your name and the organization you're with.
I'm sorry, sir. Gareth Young. I'm the president of the Houston branch of ASCE. Okay. So on behalf of the 3,500 local members we have here in Houston, just want to thank you guys for coming down to hear our local experts and let our local residents express their concerns with the devastation from Harvey. We've been focusing on the devastation. I think we've kind of glossed over some of the successes we've had here as well. Director Poppy mentioned a couple of them between the Sims Bayou with the recent improvements there that stayed in its banks, and then the flood control early warning detection system that led our local first responders and decision makers to send out timely notifications for evacuations. It didn't help the fact that folks still flooded, but at least notifications were sent out. So I think it's easy to look at at just the devastation and not see where the investment in infrastructure really does pay itself off in very short order. So just on top of that, as we rebuild, the Houston branch of ASCE wants to be a resource and ready to assist our state and local policymakers in developing sustainable long-term infrastructure solutions. So I'll answer.
Thank you.
Just to kind of elaborate just a little bit on what Gareth said. I mean, we have put a lot of money into, I know I've been a civil engineer since college for the last 33, 34 years, and I've seen the improvements we've done. And I mean, just to consider, if we hadn't had all these detention ponds and if we hadn't had all these flood warning systems in place and the channel improvements that we have put in, the area around the Harris County area, how much more massive would the flooding? We put a lot in, but we still got a long way to go.
Yeah.
So.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here, representatives. My name is Griselda Gonzalez. I'm with the ASCE Texas Section Government Affairs Committee, and you may see emails from me occasionally coming your way to invite you to events. So I'm here today representing the Texas Section Government Affairs Committee of the American Society of Civil Engineers. We are grateful that you look to ASCE as a resource on infrastructure issues. I would like to point out 2 infrastructure report card assessments to the House Committee on Natural Resources this afternoon based on the following committee charges: to examine the flooding in general and the role of regional entities in developing projects to control flooding. I will report today that the infrastructure report card gave Texas flood control a D and suggests the following: implementation of a central authority for statewide guidance on uniform floodplain management, development of statewide funding programs for flood damage reduction projects, developing early warning systems tied to local weather radars such as the one developed by Harris County, and updating floodplain maps. With the current grade of D for dams, ASCE would like to recommend that all dams upstream of highly urbanized areas be required to have an emergency action plan, as well as a maintenance and inspection program to ensure hazardous conditions are immediately addressed. Increased funding for the dam safety program to monitor and safeguard the lives of those living downstream, and development regulation in areas is needed immediately adjacent to or downstream of dams. Addressing the charge to examine flood control through new infrastructure and enhancing existing infrastructure, and mitigating efforts that would reduce the impacts of future flood events. ASCE recommends and supports the use of Envision, a tool for planning, designing, and implementing resilient and sustainable infrastructure projects. The Envision planning tool considers community environments and life cycle costs for projects, as well as impacts and mitigation. In closing, ASCE is asking you to invest now for the future with long-term consistent state and local level funding, and educating Texans with what the true cost of using, maintaining, and improving infrastructure is. Lead with the vision for all agencies to come together to ensure wise infrastructure investment and spending. We ask that you create incentives, prioritize projects, and streamline the permitting process. We ask that you prepare Texas for the future through the utilization of new approaches, materials, and technologies to build resilient and sustainable infrastructure. We also ask that you maintain a balance with land planning by understanding how new infrastructure will function with the existing infrastructure and environment. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Hey, thank you all very much for your testimony today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for allowing us to be here, and thank you for the work that y'all are doing.
Absolutely.
Look forward to working with y'all.
Jordan Macha, that's you. Okay, Jordan, do we have any other ones? Michael Bloom. Lisa Gonzalez. Yeah, y'all just take a seat and we'll just have it on a panel. Do we have any other ones? Evelyn Mertz. Evelyn? Yeah, come on up, Evelyn. Why don't we get started? Go ahead. Just state your name and who you represent. Evelyn, please come on.
Yes, thank you. My name is Jordan Maka. I'm with Bayou City Waterkeeper. We are focused on the lower Galveston Bay watershed and based here in Houston. Thank you all so much for sticking around this long and hosting this committee meeting here in Houston. This is a lot of important issues to discuss as we're thinking about how we're moving forward around post-Hurricane Harvey. I'm a Houston native, but I've also lived and worked in New Orleans, and so I'm no stranger to hurricanes or to major storms. Having moved to Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina, rebuilding the city was and continues to be a community effort. And our sister cities, who both have built their neighborhoods in high and low bayou terrain, we have a lot to learn from one another and how we manage future flooding and impacts from storms. As others have echoed, there's an opportunity to rebuild smarter, and we must resist the urge to rebuild for sentimentality, which may feel right in the very short term, but hurts our community and our city in the long haul. As a bayou city, we must recognize that we live with water, whether we actively see it every day or not. Bayou City Waterkeepers supports the regional approach that others have mentioned throughout this hearing, and we urge the committee to support land conservation for mitigation, which would further allow our bayou corridors and interior wetlands to have room for the water when it comes. Additional funding for the purchase and preservation of land through regional entities, as well as the Texas Water Development Board and Texas Parks and Wildlife's local park initiative, helps to further that goal as well. We urge the committee to commission a study to examine whether TCEQ's stormwater program could be enhanced to provide a tailored response and better flood relief, especially in our coastal cities. As a final note, we are a city surrounded by industry. It's imperative that the commission hold industry accountable to the major water pollution from orphan takes, petrochemical spills, and illicit discharge. Industry should be required to implement better disaster response preparedness along the Texas Gulf Coast. Thank you for this opportunity to present these comments.
Okay, I appreciate it very much. Anybody have any questions? I agree with you on the land conservation aspect of it. Lisa?
Thank you very much. My name is Lisa Gonzalez. I'm the president of the Houston Advanced Research Center. We're a sustainability nonprofit that's located in the Woodlands, just north of Houston. And we work on energy, water, and resilience issues. I would like to follow the theme on habitat conservation. A lot of the discussion that's occurred here regionally over the last few weeks, and we've heard a lot of that today, is focused on the need for large infrastructure projects, including new reservoirs, maintenance of existing reservoirs and regional detention basins. I think there are some alternative strategies that we can also employ at the regional level. The 8-county Houston-Galveston region is, of course, home to 7 million people. It's projected to grow to about 10 million people by the year 2050. And we have wetland habitats that include forests and grasslands that are remaining in the region, and they provide important services in the way of water storage and removal of contaminants and nutrients from storm water. 2 studies that we've completed since 2014 with funding from the General Land Office and the Coastal Management Program have found that a number of the wetlands in the region lie outside of the permitting process, meaning that we've got a lot of activities, particularly related to development, that are impacting wetlands in an unregulated fashion. Of the approximately 8,000 wetland permits that have been issued in the 8-county region since 1990, 70% of those exist within the 100-year floodplain. Only 30% of the wetland permits that have been issued since 1990 are for activities outside the 100-year floodplain. And so in light of that, as these habitats continue to be lost, so will their water storage capacity. And echoing the comments just down the table and of Mr. Bradbury earlier, habitat conservation and restoration should be key components of strategies that we're looking at moving forward. And those, of course, require funding. Very often it's state and local match dollars that are required to match the federal resources that are available that can present hurdles to those types of projects. A second point I'd like to make relates to a topic that's been mentioned earlier today relating to planning. Regional resilience planning is something that hasn't happened here in the region, and given our last 3 large flood events over the last few years at the regional level, we've yet to come together in a meaningful way, not just to talk about flood control and mitigation, but to also talk about broader aspects of resilience in ways where we're bringing diverse stakeholders and experts and members of the public together to talk about a whole host of strategies that can include things like low-impact development, retrofitting neighborhoods, rethinking building codes, and better communicating risk to homeowners and other stakeholders in the region. So we would really like to encourage the committee, and we echo some of the earlier comments today, to consider regional resilience planning for the Houston-Galveston region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate it. We had a bill that went through the House and the Senate, and it was accessing Clean Water Revolving Fund, the state fund, and we're going to follow the Ohio model, which they were able to capture using a little bit over $2 million of that fund. They were able to capture over $14 million. They go out and they could create a multiplier with the nonprofits in their state, and they secured a lot of this property. We're going to go back after it next session. A lot of folks didn't quite understand what it is. We've seen a huge opportunity in and around the San Antonio area, 300,000 acres of land that's been secured to keep using conservation easements to keep things that are incompatible being built over the aquifer. Impervious cover has been reduced, and the balance has been all positive. We're trying to take that same plan and bring it into the coastal regions, obviously because of flooding, also the degradation in water quality. All those issues could be reconciled if we're real aggressive. Other states are doing it, we're way behind. And so hopefully everybody will understand what we're talking about next time around.
We and other local partners would be happy to help in any way we can.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Mertz, you want to?
We got it, okay. Hello? Is it working? Hello? Okay. now
Yes,
it works.
ma'am. You're on.
My name is Evelyn Mers. I'm here today representing the Houston Regional Group of the Sierra Club. I did want to mention that I live on Sims Bayou, which did not flood, and I know a great deal was attributed to infrastructure. But as one of the people who changed the original plan proposed by the engineers into one that was more greener and neighborhood friendly, it's not just infrastructure, it's the amount of permeable surface, the tremendous amount of parks and green space as well. And I think that should also be looked at, not just infrastructure. I'd also like to make a note that it's been well known for years about the sand mining problems on the San Jacinto and the tremendous amount of sediment that's being gone into the river. The issue is the TCEQ rubber stamps sand mining operations. The TCEQ is responsible for carrying out the provisions of the Clean Water Act, which is basically that responsibility devolves to the state, and that state agency responsible for that is the TCEQ, and sand mining operations tend to be rubber stamped. So that would be something that would be some good questions to ask the TCEQ. Getting back to my comments as originally prepared, in 2011, the Houston Sierra Club sued the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers over its approval of a permit to proceed with construction of Segment E at the Grand Parkway. In part, that lawsuit was brought because the Corps had not adequately considered the effect of runoff from secondary development in the Addicks watershed, which would follow road construction, i.e. covering with impervious surface. The flows, all these flows go into the Buffalo Bayou watershed and behind the Addicks Dam. It was known that the runoff would flow behind the dam. This was of concern because a Freedom of Information Act request revealed a 2010 Corps study that classified Addicks and Barker Addicks and Barker dams as a safety risk, being urgent and compelling, quote unquote. Dealing with additional runoff would either mean further inundating the development west of the dam or increasing the water released downstream. Neither is a good choice, and the Corps is faced with the need to protect the dam. The dams, both built out just after World War II, are not operating as originally designed. Structures in the immediate west side of Addicks Dam are on land that was meant to be acquired for use in the dam pool, but the Congress never appropriated the money to acquire the land. That's why there are houses there. This means that not only buyouts, but additional detention and emphasis on providing vegetated permeable green space that can slow runoff. All these things are needed to lessen the impacts of major rainfall flooding events. This is applicable not only actually to the Buffalo Bayou watershed and its associated watersheds, but to others such as Greens and Brays, which experienced catastrophic flooding. Buyout should be prioritized not only of properties vulnerable to flooding, but by their locations that would allow additional detention to be provided. The decision of an owner to sell under a voluntary buyout program is partially determined by whether the owner can obtain a permit to rebuild and the affordability of flood insurance. The issuance of permits to rebuild should be carefully considered, particularly the elevation requirements in the permit for a structure that has flooded previously. In some areas, the requirement that structure should be elevated either 12 to 18 inches above the base flood elevation is not adequate. Adequate future protection could require being built several feet higher than the 12 to 18-inch requirement. It's also important that when elevating a structure, that fill is not brought in. That simply displaces the water and just is a temporary fix because you really are not allowing the water to flow. Displacement is an issue as well. Placement of detention can be limited by the availability of land in the appropriate location and the timing and impact of the collection of the impact fees. The impact fee structure should be reevaluated for each watershed. And while we're planning for detention, calculating capacity, and estimating impervious surface, the question is, what storm are we preparing for? What part of the floodplain are we willing to protect? How much can we afford to protect? And as part of that, climate change and sea level rise must also be part of the planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mertz. Anybody have any questions? Appreciate it. Thank you. Let's go to Yvette Ariano and Alicia Garcia. Come up. Yes, and Laura Blackburt, if you're still here. Why don't y'all come up? Yes, ma'am, just state your name and what organization you represent.
Okay.
Laura, just come up and sit down. We'll get you something.
Hi, my name is Alicia Garcia. I am a community member of Dayton, Texas, and I am partnered with Texas Environmental Justice Advocacy Services. I've lived in Texas since 2011, so it's been 6 years. And I feel like a broken record saying I've never seen flooding the way we did with Harvey. We had to leave my house for 4 days and 3 nights to a local church. We had to leave behind, not just me, but a lot of families in my neighborhood had to leave a lot of their livestock behind, their pets. And due to flooding, we could not get out of the neighborhood that I was in. So how my neighborhood is, there's 2 exits. There's one to I-90, and I-90 was closed because of the Arkema plant. And 146 was also closed because I-10, the underpass of I-10 was flooded. So we had no way to get out away from the flooding or from the plant. We did not actually hear about the plant exploding until the day before the first plume went up. We were told how to do shelter in place by Tejas. I think it's law for these agencies for you to let you know how to do shelter in place, when to do shelter in place, and I had to find out through a separate source. I actually live 4 miles away from the plant, so I could see the plume when it first went up, and we tried to leave when the first plume, when we saw it, but we had to turn around because the roads were so flooded we couldn't get through. And then after that, we spent another week in Pasadena. And I'm just here to say that we need to bring vulnerable communities to the table because a lot of people in the rural areas, poorer communities have not been brought forward, I think, or represented well enough to actually address their needs. and they know their communities best. So I feel like they would be a very important resource for you guys to know what you guys can go forward with. And I'm here also with the public testimony that Tejas has provided about the Clean Water Act. Tejas supports the Clean Water Act and asks for the support of the Natural Resource Committee to uphold the requirement for Texas counties to continue to obtain a permit to discharge stormwater runoff to other bodies of water in our state. This will reduce harmful pollutants in our floodwater. Coastal Spine. Tejas supports a financial system for the Coastal Spine project that is equitable for low-income marginalized communities. We support a sound project where those who stand to benefit from the Coastal Spine near the greater portion of the coast. Tejas asks, how will the Coastal Spine project be combined with other risk reduction interventions such as wetlands in the bay and local barriers and gates around the Galveston Bay to come to a comprehensive flood risk reduction system for the region? Tejas is also concerned for the creation of a gate and its impact on exchanges through the Bolivar Road Strait, including effects on water flow and migration of marine life. Tejas quotes Colonel Chris Sellies, Coastal Programs Manager at Danabaum Engineering. A big concern is that it would be greatly hindered the flow of water between the bay, one of the region's most productive estuaries in the Gulf of Mexico. That would change the hydrodynamics, morphology, and water quality of the bay. Texas A&M oceanographer Bill Merrill, who conceived of the coastal spine concept, has been opposed to placing a storm surge barrier anywhere but directly on the coast because he says putting anything further inland would protect certain areas at the expense of others. Tejas supports ongoing communication with communities near the 52-mile shipping lane in the Houston Ship Channel and those near the coastal spine.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Anybody have any questions? Sorry, I think all of us saw that plant, and we saw it on TV, didn't know what was going to happen, and then we saw, what happened subsequent to them suggesting that it could create some environmental fallout. So thanks for coming. Yes, ma'am.
My name's Yvette Ariano. I'm with Texas Environmental Justice Advocacy Services as a research and grassroots advocate. We work with communities all along the east side, the 16-mile stretch from the 5th Ward area, Pleasantville, Galena Park, Pasadena, all the way to Baytown. Our communities were extremely hit and inundated with the floodwaters that Harvey presented in 2 different ways. But I'll go ahead and present our statement. Tejas supports ongoing communication with communities near the 52-mile shipping lane of the Houston Ship Channel. Our support is the inclusion of communities along with the proposed bayou projects, especially in communities near Brays, Hunting, and White Oak bayous for community input. Communities like Pleasantville will be impacted by the Hunting Bayou, and they should be included in any decision-making for their area. Retention pond mitigation must also be enforced with developers to ensure that they are held responsible for development standards. We believe in a comprehensive reservoir system that includes prairie lands and other forms of natural flood controls. It's imperative that the Clean Water Act standards are not diminished in this process, but that they are upheld and that we ensure that floodwater pollutants are reduced or eliminated. I agree with the speakers that spoke before, whether it's Lisa, Jim Bradbury, or Evelyn Mers, that along the coastal lands and along the Houston Ship Channel, we have vulnerable communities. Not only do we care about Houston because it's our home, but we care about it because it's beautiful. Yes, there's a 16-mile stretch of refineries, but at the end of the day, home is home. In Pasadena, when those floodwaters came, 2 days after the Kinder Morgan plant released an unannounced amount of fuel, there was a family whose children swallowed the floodwaters. They ended up in the emergency rooms. This is only one of many stories of impacted communities in vulnerable environments, environmental justice communities that because Houston lacks any form of zoning, they sit and their neighbors to chemical refineries, to oil refineries, to pipelines and storage facilities. So as we talk and sit here, and again, that urgency that was expressed before, as we sit here and talk, You have communities whose health impacts were greatly affected, not only by the floodwaters themselves, but by the toxics that were carried through and throughout. And it will happen again. We are only years, if not months, from another big storm happening. These storms are getting larger and they're getting stronger, and they're affecting vulnerable communities, environmental justice communities, rural communities. They're affecting us most. We're getting the resources last. And at the end of the day, this is all human life. Please just do the right thing. There are processes like the chemical disaster rule. Reinforce that. Because these floodwaters are more dangerous than just water. It's more dangerous than just cholera or typhoid or E. coli. And our families are dying. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Laura?
Can you hear?
Yes, ma'am.
Can
I think
you?
you can
Okay.
tilt that down.
Thank
if
you.
need to.
Yeah. My name is Laura Blackburn, and I'm representing the League of Women Voters of Texas. I do want to thank you for coming to Houston. It's good to see your faces here. We appreciate the opportunity to present our comments as well. We are concerned, as I think these folks are, not only about the incredible loss of property and reduce the impacts relating to health and welfare of those who live on or near the Gulf Coast. I'm surprised no one mentioned the Superfund site in the San Jacinto River, which, because of the flood, as you probably know, there was a cap put on the wastes that are there, and it was broken, and all of that dioxin primarily was not all, but a great deal was released. I'm delighted that A&M Galveston is taking, if you read the paper yesterday or this morning, I've forgotten which, students and professors are now taking water samples, both at the San Jacinto River, but also in the Galveston Bay, to see what's in there. They already know there's about 2,000 times the amount of dioxin, which is a very carcinogenic compound, higher than anyone would even dream. I hate to bring this up, but I taught at Kingwood High School. and I have 3 sisters who live in Kingwood, and I lived myself there for about 20 years. Now, in a different sort of a way, we've moved to a condo at Clear Lake. Now, nobody's mentioned this particular thing either. I've lived in Houston most of my life, and I've endured many hurricanes. So at this point, if a hurricane is coming, I'm off to see my daughter who lives in West Texas. I've just had enough of hurricanes, thank you very much. But my three sisters were there and have been there. My sister, who I taught AP biology, and my sister taught AP chemistry at Kingwood High School, and we were right next door to each other. She has rheumatoid arthritis. I have arthritis all over my body. What happened at our facility at the condo was that the water only came up about 2 feet, but that was enough to ruin the elevator. And the elevator has been out now since the flood, and it will be several more weeks. I now wear a brace on my knee just so I can get up and down 4 flights of stairs every day. And this happens to people who, I read the story about somebody saying in Florida, if you live on the 16th floor, don't think you're safe because the elevators will go out. And indeed, that happens in these multi-story complexes. League members became concerned about depletion and conservation of natural resources as far back as the 1920s and 30s. we undertook a study of flood control, erosion, and creation of the Tennessee Valley Authority. I wish I had been here then, because I would have loved to have undergone that study. We were also in Houston active in opposition to importing water from the Mississippi River, which some of you will remember was a big deal a number of years ago, as well as opposing the use of concrete to line Buffalo Bayou. We won both of these battles, I'm happy to say, partly because of then Representative George H.W. Bush, who helped us get that done. We are consumed with periods of drought and periods of too much water, and we're trying to find a way to cope with those natural events, and if anything, to make everything better, and I think that's what we will do. I think the citizens of Houston are determined to turn our vast knowledge and creativity to looking at land use in such a way that it will be a revolutionary change. I was delighted to hear Emmett say that we have got to change these things, and he is absolutely right. I can tell you, and I can tell anybody in this room, the cost is going to be significant. And all of us are going to pay for that cost. The League of Women Voters is strongly in favor of having adequate funds fund projects. Not just a little, but adequate. And we are also supportive of citizens paying the cost, which we do in the way of taxes, in the way of taxes that we're not really aware of, whether it be sales tax or whether it be the property taxes that we pay. What we need to do is have a change in how we address the use of the land and the water so that we are not harmed. Several things are obvious. We must use our land and water in such a way that we improve both resources, including nature, in our planning, which not only reduces the cost, but adds to the quality of life. Building on flood pools without telling homeowners of their risk has absolutely no justification. Conceals information homeowners need to make informed decisions and leads to catastrophe. Openness in government is the goal we all seek. Another change we must accomplish is planning for the future, and we're talking about that today. And I'm curious about how we're going to go out, how we're going to do that planning, and if we could take into account the rising temperatures of this earth, because absolutely impacts our water supply and what we are doing with it. So we must look forward and not just look behind at what floods have occurred and so forth, but we have to look forward. I had my students at Kingwood High School draw graphs of the temperature at the Mauna Loa peak in Hawaii, which is where we got the best temperatures at that particular time, which is about 10 years ago. Now, of course, we have some other ways of taking that measure. As you go along, things are pretty level for a long time, and then it starts going up, and then it starts going up very quickly because of the buildup of carbon dioxide, et cetera. I think there has to be a way, a correlation of temperature of the earth and and our projections of water that we need and the projections of floods as we have not only more frequent storms, but greater intensity storms. Some have suggested a 500-year floodplain. However, if we consider those stronger storms, we must plan further than that. In addition, we must, as people have mentioned today, take a regional approach to designate floodplains and work to reduce flooding dangers. We must also work hand in hand with efforts to protect the Texas Gulf Coast. Many plans have been developed, and while environmental remediation still needs to be a part of that, we must include the coast in our future plans. Several plans exist, and we do support the coastal spine, as developed by A&M University at Galveston, as well as the Mid-Channel Gate, as developed by the Speed Center at Rice. Upgrading our building codes is essential. The League supports the most up-to-date building codes possible for coastal areas, taking into account future storms of increasing intensity and frequency, as well as cost. Building code should take into account elevation, roofs, windows, and should be strictly enforced at every level of government. We are behind in upgrading our reservoirs, and now we see that we will need more. And I don't think there's any doubt about that. Infrastructure, I'm sorry, our folks have gone, is the key, and it must be kept up to date. We've learned that the hard way during Harvey. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Laura. Anybody have any questions? Yes. Dave?
Thank you, Ms. Blackburn. I'm glad you brought up the paper mill injection site. I got involved with this about a year ago or so, and we actually had some great progress, and it was at one point fully funded to remove all the dioxins, if you recall.
Yes.
And then it was scaled back to just recapping it, basically.
Yes.
And what happened in this event is what we thought would happen eventually, is that cap would eventually come off.
Exactly.
And the levels downstream are just phenomenal of what they're finding in the wildlife and in the fish, and it's
Yep.
pretty horrific. And I drive past it every time I come to Austin or Houston. I drive past that site. It's right there off I-10. You could throw a
I
rock
know
at
where
it.
it is.
And it's surrounded by barges. And it's basically at one point it was probably a parking lot for barges. They probably just ran them right up there. But anyway, I appreciate you bringing it up. It's something we need to keep working on. Hopefully get funded. It all comes down to funds at this point.
Of course it does. Everything always does.
And it's pretty, we're pretty strapped right now. So thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you all very much for testifying. Do we have anybody else that'd like to testify today? I know Councilman Martin, you wanted to come up briefly and recap some of the folks' concerns over in Kingwood.
No, it's been a long day, and God bless you for doing this. I wanted to, first of all, thank my guys from Houston TV, HTV, for video streaming
Absolutely.
this today. So thank you very much. And,
Thank you.
and Chairman Lawson, Representative Swanson, Representative Phelan, and even Miss Houston, thanks for sticking it out. One thing that we can do tomorrow, and it doesn't cost us a penny, is to release water from Lake Conroe and get it to a level that we can be comfortable with. Whether it's 1 feet, 2 feet, 5 feet, 10 feet, whatever they're comfortable with, until we can do the data studies and do the information, that will help us. 2 feet of water released out of the lake over the next 30, 60 days, whatever it is, will give us a comfort level in order to do. I'll find the money for the sand mines in the dredging of the study for San Jacinto River. I'll find that $64,000. But it at least gives us a little bit of peace of mind knowing that we can take the level down. And if you heard Mr. Hoffman from the Travis, from Lake Travis, they have 33 feet of room of which to store water. San Jacinto River Authority has 18 inches. 18 inches is nothing, but if we take it down 3 feet and 8 inches, or 3 feet and 3.5 feet, by giving us an extra 2 feet in that, it would give us a peace of mind. It would give us some time that we can have to study these initiatives. And that's all I ask. It wouldn't cost us a penny, and that's what you as a committee could probably do tomorrow. And my last comment is, please connect with me via Facebook, and you'll see the video of my talking with the gentleman from Harris County Office of Emergency Management, where he made the comment about never meeting with any from the San Jacinto River Authority. That contradicts the statement that was made up here today. So go to my Facebook, watch the video, and see for yourself. And thanks for doing this. It means a lot to us.
Thank you, Councilman. Thanks for your support.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. I don't believe we have anybody else to testify. I want to thank all the committee members and Representative Swanson and all of the folks that came in from Kingwood and throughout East Texas to give us their perspective on what we need to do moving forward. Either one of y'all have anything you'd like to say before we close? Okay. The Committee on Natural Resources stands adjourned, subject to the call of the chair.